Welcome, everyone, to what is actually our last webinar of the year. Makes sense that it would be an Omeda sponsored webinar. So, thank you all for being here. Thanksgiving is 1 week from now, but we've got some work to do before we all get to kind of break for that. In a recent newsletter, I talked about how important it is for publishers to get leaner with their businesses. If you're an audience first publisher, your focus should be on investing in what the audience cares about, which is your content, and spending less of your time trying to build revolutionary systems and over all of that. And obviously, one of the ways to ensure you're delivering on that to your audience is to not overinvest in tech, streamline your operations, and execute more efficiently. As an example, forcing people to log into multiple systems to do their job is not a good way to run an efficient business. And that's why I'm really looking forward to today's webinar because Mansueto Ventures, which, if you don't know, they own Fast Company and Inc. They made the decision to get rid of 7 systems that were core to running the business. And in exchange, they brought in one platform. So they went from 7 softwares to one. And before you think that functionality disappeared because of that, think again. So we're going to have a good conversation. Joining me is Anne-Marie O'Keefe, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Mansueto. Anne-Marie, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
So this is going to be a lot of fun, but before we, which is kind of a funny thing to say since we're talking about operations, and we were Anne-Marie and I in the practice webinar, we're talking about how this is like the least sexy part of the media business. I think we're going to have to come up with Anne-Marie, you were talking about how sales gets a big gong when they close a big ad deal.
That's
So like
right.
when you I don't know, integrate all your systems into the one, you just get a massive gong and just bang it all around the floor. We'll make operations sexy again. How about that? But first, special thanks to Omeda for making this webinar possible. Omeda is an audience engagement platform built for organizations that depend on strong audience relationships to grow. Their solution combines a customer data platform, marketing automation, and subscription management all in one place. With Omeda, you can put your first-party data to work, connecting channels, personalizing experiences, and driving revenue without juggling multiple tools, almost like taking from 7 to 1. Head over to omeda.com to learn more. Some quick housekeeping rules. Q&A is turned on for this, so if as we are talking, you would like some clarification on something that Anne-Marie said, submit a question down in the Q&A, and we will get that answered. So let's jump in. Before we kind of dig into the nitty-gritty, I want to sort of frame the challenge. So the title of the webinar is From 7 Systems to One, and Mansueto was operating with 7 different pieces of software. What were those systems?
Yes. So we were operating with a CDP that was separate than our ESP, that was separate from our subscription, digital subscription fulfillment, that was separate from our print subscription fulfillment, that was separate from some of our, I don't know if you'd want to call them casual forms like sweepstakes or lead generation forms. That was still yet different than our membership application and sales software, and different than the database we use for all of our application and award programs. And so we were operating with a lot of software. We still are. We've kicked off our migration. It's been super fun so far. Because when you do the very boring work of operations, you like stuff like this. And so we're having a lot of fun. But we had a lot of time and energy spent on the internal teams connecting all of these systems, making them talk to each other. And when they didn't talk to each other, developing and maintaining the middleware that you need between systems. We're a really small product and engineering organization. We have a product team of 4 and an engineering team of 9 full-time employees, and to have those employees' resources so disproportionately devoted to maintenance and API calls, as opposed to really focusing and working on products for our audience. So this kind of frees them up to do that.
How, when you look back, how did the tech stack get that complex, right? Is it just like a bunch of little paper cuts? Like, was it almost an intentional decision? Like, talk through a little bit of the decision making that went into
Yeah.
complexity.
So I feel that it is my duty to fix this because I am the root cause of much of it. I think I've been at Mansueto 15 years, and in that time, we've seen tremendous growth on what we call our consumer lines of business. And that growth was not assured. It was not assured growth. And so when we would come up with a new product we wanted to sell to consumers, we would actually go out and find the little piece of software that does that thing the best. Because if we were going to try it, we were going to give it the best try possible. And so that is how we ended up with so many different little pieces of software because we made a lot of bets on consumer revenue that did end up really successful. And I think what's happened, and it's a really blessed problem to have, but we had this crisis of scale because now we have so many customers siloed in all of these systems. It's become really challenging to look across and to really get the true value of a single customer who's maybe buying two or more products from us.
And so, was the biggest pain point that of those nine engineers, most of their lives were spent just maintaining the seven systems, or was the pain point that you couldn't really isolate how much like you were generating in revenue from your various customers? Like,
So,
what was it?
yeah, the technology teams have their own set of pain points, which is maintaining all of this stuff and also always having to know the language of the other system. And a lot of times, they're whatever we were working with wasn't using the same coding as we use on our site. There was a lot of compatibility stuff. So technology always has had their own real pain points with this. The consumer marketers have a very different pain point, and that is that ability to look across customer and to create experiences for customers with the true knowledge of who they are. And I think when when you when you get into a situation like we were in, and you've sort of scaled the business, and the marketers are keeping Excel files of their best customer on their desktop, you've got real problems there.
Yeah.
So every team, depending on their discipline, we're having separate issues with the amount of systems.
And so, I mean, before we hopped on, we were talking about how you just wrapped up another project where you migrated from a homegrown CMS to WordPress VIP, taking 2 years to do that. So you really like systems migrations. Um, do you think that there's a problem in our industry of publishers having too much software, building things on on their own rather than taking off the shelf? Like, is this endemic to our industry? And why do you think that is?
Yes. I don't think it's endemic to our industry. I'm also married to a digital transformation consultant, and certainly he's constantly helping clients of other industries unravel their own homegrown software nightmares. I think you get really smart technology people who like to build things, and when you bring builders into the organization, they're going to build, and that's great. Except that we have to be really clear about what it is our company does. And our company creates amazing digital content for business people. And when I bring a builder into the organization, I want their time and energy focused on building for that end user, as opposed to building for a different internal customer, when I could probably find a specialist like Omida that can service the internal customer maybe even better than what we could have built ourselves. And I also think we suffer. I make this joke a lot throughout the RFP process, looking at for unified platform. We have long considered ourselves very special. And I think we are. I think Fast Company is a really special business media brand. I think Inc. is a really special business media brand. But it is not because they were on a Franken Drupal CMS or because we have a ton of different audience platforms. That was actually had nothing to do with what made those really special. And stripping all of that complexity away lets us focus on the thing that does make us really special and hopefully starts to give our editors opportunities for products they've wanted to build for a really long time that we kept saying, oh no, we can't do that on our CMS. Oh yes, I see the screenshot from this other publisher. That sure would be nice that we don't have that capability. And now we're starting to say, oh yeah, we can do that. Oh yeah, that, that looks like, let me just look up, how that's done on that platform. Or now the other thing that's been really cool is because we're using these platforms, there's this whole community of other publishers on these platforms. And so now there's a friend to phone. Every one of us has met people using the same CMS we are and can now pick up the phone and say, hey, we're trying to do this thing. How did you guys do that? And, have you ever had an experience like this?
Yeah, it's operating on similar systems allows that sort of cross company communication, when one of those systems can dedicate all of their engineering time to build a new feature,
Right.
everyone benefits from that feature rather than you having to prioritize. Yeah, being part of, I spent years in the product world, and being part of new feature development is just, unless you're a software company, it is not a great place to be. All right, so you inevitably chose Omida, and I want to talk about that for a little bit. But before we do, talk to me a little bit about the breaking point where you like, did Omida come to you, or did you go out and like say, I need to go from like seven to maybe four. I need to just get rid of some of them. Talk a little bit about that process where you finally realized the problem's there, and how did you think about fixing it?
Yes. So at one point, we were having this really big challenge where our paywall modals, um, a certain type of ad that we were running, and another piece from our CDP, if you were a specific kind of customer, you were unfortunately hitting all three, sometimes, on the same page or a page apart. And so we had to do all of this work internally to make these three systems live together so that a single customer experience on our site would not be so negative. And it was terrible, honestly. I think that was probably 3 years ago. And I went into it saying, after the CMS, I have to do something about this. I have to do something about this. Um, Started dabbling with what an RFP would look like at that time. Really had to think about which of our businesses, because we do have a couple of different consumer business lines, which of our businesses needed that help and which really didn't. Uh, and so we have an extra system we've left out of this, which is our event registration, which I'm never leaving. Uh, that's an API I will be happy to maintain for the rest of my life, right? But the other pieces of the business certainly lent themselves to going into one system together. And then I happened to be at a dinner and I happened to be seated at a table with a gentleman from Omida. I had actually never heard of them before. Mentioned that I was embarking on this journey. His eyes obviously lit up because, when does a prospect fall into your lap like that? And then, we started chatting before I even had the RFP done. And then I reached out to a bunch of really great companies. And ultimately, Omida, frankly, could take more of the pieces. And I think ultimately that ESP piece really made us, uh, really helped us double down on that decision.
So let's pull on that thread. So you said the ESP piece kind of gave you
Yes.
a lot of confidence. So what about Omida made you think it was the right place to go to take seven to one?
So we were impressed that so let me just say how it works right now because it's so funny and so crazy. I feel like, I'm in a support circle. How it works right now is if I have particular users that I want to say, we have these really high priced membership products, we guard those people very carefully. And so the marketer who runs membership acquisition is taking her prospects and then going into all these places to pull how they've interacted with us, and also having to say to the other marketers who are marketing other lines of business, you can't have my people. Right now, these are my people for this month. And you have to make them a suppression file on your marketing efforts coming out of the same ESP. And then this is going to be my list, right? I mean, it's that manual. And it in a in one way, it's such a credit to that team because they've really built that consumer business up with that entrepreneurial spirit. So they had no system. Okay, no problem. No problem, Avery. You're not going to give us any tools. I'll make an Excel file and I'll dial for dollars, right? They're really an amazing group of people because they're willing to do that. What we were impressed in Omida is that there was this unified system where we could actually, in the system, mark those people were in a journey, a voyage, whatever you want to call it, for this membership product, without all that manual back and forth, all that double checking with one another, having to pass an Excel file, via Microsoft Teams to say, like, here's the suppression list I need you to use. That was really impressive to us. And I'm sure it sounds like table stakes to a lot of people on the call, but to us, it really would be, it's going to be a big difference and a huge help.
I oftentimes think about how many businesses are powered by Excel
Yeah.
that if Microsoft decided to tack on like a 0.25% like revenue fee for Excel, the economy, they would be $100 trillion business overnight because we wouldn't know what to do without Excel.
Yes.
It is probably one of the, yeah, anyway, this is not an advertisement for Excel, but every
Well,
single
we'd have to
operator I
learn
talk
all new formulas in Google Sheets, and who wants to do that?
well, then you're trusting Google to do that, and they would do the same thing. Every
Right.
single operator I talk about, like we at Morning Brew, we powered our entire advertising business in Google Sheets, including
Mhm.
like if four advertisers were all going for the same ad placement, we had four names in the cell. I mean, AMO is the same way.
Yep.
It's anyway, yeah. So, all right.
All
So,
any really fast growth is going to be.
right.
And I think a lot of internally, I say to the team, we only got here because you did such a great job. Because it's not to, it's not to feel terrible about where we are. We are where we are, and we even have the privilege of looking at a new platform because we got here. And so these are just growth pains. I'm glad that we had the growth to have the pain. And I'm glad that I have the opportunity, I hope to undo a little of my doing to help solve it.
I've come to know many of the Omida folk. Who was the gentleman at that dinner with you?
Tony.
Tony's great. Tony's great. All right. So you are now embarking on this journey to get rid of seven systems, go with Omida. As you look at all the various types of data that you've got across product, subscriptions, both print and digital, your memberships, you've got your forms, you've got your sweepstakes. If you look at all of that, what opportunities become obvious once you finally unify all that audience data?
Bundling. Bundling has remained really elusive for this reason. Somebody coming in, a CEO of a, most innovative company, coming in and becoming an Impact Council member, right? Amazing. I'd like to tack on a corporate sub for the company. It is ridiculously hard. It cannot be done in the same transaction right now. The opportunity to bundle is an enormous one. We see just tons of potential there. We're really excited about it. And I think too, it's not just bundling for everybody, it's that we're able to personalize because we have who this user is to us. And so there's really smart ways that we can say, oh, he already has the corporate sub. How about, right? How about tacking on, something else? How about, a table of 10 to celebrate your Inc. 5000 win at the gala, right? Things like that. And we think that opportunity is tremendous.
Yeah, I think every operator looks at how the New York Times has sort of found a lot of success with their multi-product bundle and are going, well, I've got multiple products. Why can't I do that myself? And
Yes.
I've heard of numerous stories of publishers talking about how they've got one product and they have another one that would be perfect for that first product audience to get, but like they have tiny, tiny overlap. And it's like that's a huge opportunity to relatively simply increase revenue, but getting the systems to talk is just impossible.
Right.
So you can only, yeah, it's again, what happens when you build, it also actually happens when you do a lot of M&A because you get a lot of disparate systems. All right, so you've got user data in all these different places. You've got memberships, you've got subscriptions. Talk a little bit about how you're all thinking about data cleanup to make sure that once you finally do have everyone in Omeda, that it's crystal clear who everyone is.
We are, I think this is our best opportunity to clean out the attic. So we are cleaning out the attic. I mean, one of our systems, Inc., not Fast Company, but Inc. has been in since 1984 or 1986. It's a really big opportunity to assess what we have, to do the matching. I think we are going to be both pleasantly surprised at the depth of information we have on our customers and very disappointed in the number of actual unique customers there are. I'm preparing emotionally for my big number to really be a much smaller number, especially because Amita can have one user with multiple email addresses. And that is going to be true and keep us honest, but I'm getting myself ready for it.
And that is just to kind of pull on that, that's an example where a user might have, like you have your email at mansueto.com, but then you also have your personal Gmail if you
Correct.
use Gmail, and you might sign up for the same publication, one with like a subscription and one with just a newsletter. So is it two people or one person? It's actually one Anne Marie.
That's right. And it's
Yeah.
going to be one in Omita, and I'm going to have to just own that. Whatever whatever that smaller number is the number, and it's true and correct. And I'm getting myself ready for it.
All right. So downside is fewer customers. Upside, the ability to get those customers buying more products because you can more cleanly market to them.
Right. And I'll actually know who they are. I'll have a 360 view of who they are.
You can't pay your bills with duplicate customers. You can pay your bills with increased revenue. So I'll take
Correct.
the increased revenue 10 days out of 10.
Correct. And that is why operators never get to hit the gong.
I think we need to change this. I think you should change this. Every time you hit, like you add an incremental 5,000 paid subscribers, smack the gong. Or if your bundle rate goes up another percent, hit the gong. Just like become more ridiculous than the sales team, and maybe they'll realize that their gong hitting has always been bizarre. Uh,
I'll ask our chief revenue officer to share it with me.
there we go. So I think when most people talk about audience data, they mostly focus on how their marketing teams can use it. How are you thinking about taking this unified audience data and sort of sharing that out with both the marketing team, but also sales and the editorial team?
Our editorial team is extremely data focused. I always am surprised when I hear other people tell me theirs aren't. Uh, I also have real reporting deliverables to both our editors in chief and various other editorial stakeholders in the organization. They want to know certainly traffic, right? That they grew up like that. They've always wanted to know the traffic on their pieces. They want to know conversion. They want to know how many newsletter conversions, how many paid subscription conversions. They really want this depth of understanding of what different types of behavior their content drives. I do not go to their daily editorial meetings, so how they then take that and spread it across the newsroom or how they use that to build their strategy. I've never asked them to show me, but they are keenly interested. We have both editors in chiefs log in and look at our daily subscription sales every morning. They look every day. When I have a dip in email newsletter subscribers, or if the send number goes down, I get a message almost, immediately upon the newsletter report going out. Uh, it's a partnership, and one where they realize that data is incredibly important. For the salespeople, they they like to know the audience that they're selling. I think that our sales team has an incredibly close relationship with the audiences that they sell, partially because we have such an amazing tentpole event business. So we have the Fast Company Innovation Festival, which happens in New York in September, and we have the Inc. 5000 Conference and Gala, which happens in October in various places. It'll be in Texas in 26. Our salespeople are there. They're there meeting with clients, but they're also there engaging with our attendees. And they have this really good understanding of who the audience is. And when they're selling, they want to know, they want those data points so that they know, is this going to be a good program for our readership or not? And I always use Inc. as the example because Inc. is in this really unique position. This is what the SVP of sales at Inc. always teaches me, that the Inc. advertisers are really spiritually, missionally invested in helping small businesses grow. So is Inc. And it is that shared desire of supporting the audience that really makes those ad programs impactful. And so obviously she wants tons and tons of information.
You know, when I think about the editorial team use case for it, I remember years ago there was an executive who talked about the different types of content that acquired paid subscribers and retained paid subscribers, and there was often different. I can imagine an editorial team would have value in understanding which of their stories were bringing in net new subs, but then for your segments of subscribers that might be slightly less engaged, that could be churn risk. Knowing what they are engaging with could present editorial with a strategy to invest more in those types of stories. If we always see that the same cohort of audience is leaving, we're not giving them the value that they expected when they signed up. So having that data, I think, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, logged in users and what they're reading is an incredibly important metric across the organization. Something that I do report on to the edit teams every week in my trackers.
Listening to you talk about your editorial team, this is a third party, a viewer question. Where does impact and trust fit in? It's impact just subscriptions, or is there something else? And how do you measure and track that?
So impact and trust on the journalism piece.
I suspect that's what yeah.
Yeah. We are incredibly privileged in that Mansueto Ventures, which is the parent company of Inc. and Fast Company, has long been led by people who came up on the editorial side, because journalism is one of the most important pieces of our company. I've been in conversations with media industry veterans who will say, "Oh, your live events business is your journalism is a front for your events business or your custom content business." That's not true here, and I know to a lot of people that sounds kind of naive, but it is our reality. My boss Stephanie is our CEO, but she's also our chief content officer. We take that seriously, and I think the quality piece is right up there in terms of corporate goals, right next to the revenue piece. It's not, we're never looking to do one to sacrifice the other. And so what I would say to that is there are really important stories to tell that maybe don't get certain amount of traffic or a certain amount of subscriptions. I don't imagine either of my editors in chief saying, well, we're not going to tell that important story because, I just don't see that happening. And I think our audience knows that they can trust us for that reason.
So you've signed on the dotted line, you're starting this process. Talk a little bit about what challenges there have been in getting the broader team to buy into this change. Because I know people get very comfortable with their systems, and then you tell them we're going to take away the tool you use every day. It's got to cause some agita for some people. So talk about those
Yeah,
challenges.
absolutely. And also the time and effort they've invested into making those systems work. And it all feels very personal. So I think for me, the human side of transformation is where I probably spend half of my time, because what you're saying to these people who've been really successful at either building something homegrown or spinning up a workaround, or uh, you're saying we need to make a change. Uh, and I think the context is always really important. And I think it's always really important. For example, before I put the RFP out into the world, I made it public to the entire ops division. Because if there was feedback on that piece, I want to know. I want to know if I'm not representing their thoughts and dreams. On the flip side of that, once we selected a vendor, I had to come back and tell everybody we're not doing custom. We're buying a vendor off the shelf and we're not doing custom because custom is what is now holding our growth back. And it's, again, not a personal thing. All of these incredibly smart entrepreneurial people made it work. And that is not a detraction from that. But what's happening right now, this is the way I put it to everybody. It might be a terrible metaphor. What's happening right now is we're in a garage and we have all of these pieces in separate places. We need to assemble them. We need to assemble them into an engine because we're not going to be able to move forward if we don't. Because all of that amazing work that got us here isn't going to get us there, isn't going to get us to the next step. This is what's going to get us to the next step. So I need them to take all of that amazing work that they've done and I need them to do it again, except in, on this new system. And I need them to resist the urge to over customize it. And it's really hard. It's hard. And I will say, Jacob, I say this a lot, and everybody's like, no, that's not true, but it is true. There's days I have to eat lunch alone. Everybody's mad at me. But that's kind of the job, right? And nobody ever gets exactly what they want. I'm trying to make it better, not perfect.
Right. So we all have a boss. You have a boss. We all have to get sign off on any sort of big, you know, investment. You've got systems. Now you're talking about yanking systems out and replacing it with a new system. And earlier you talked about the ability to bundle, and which really is another way of talking about increasing the LTV of every one of your customers. When you sat down with your CEO to say, look, this is the project I want us to embark on, did you model out where you thought the LTV growth would come in? Like you thought after a year of this, we think we'll convert 5% more of our people from X to Y. Like, was that an exercise that you did where you could quickly realize how these systems could almost pay for themselves?
Yes, on every individual line of business, the impact was shared. And then I think the big, maybe surprising thing is that we're not actually spending more money, because each individual platform had their own fee. And also some of the platforms, you had to have somebody on staff that almost acted as the platform admin. And so we're actually, for us, it's been kind of expense neutral. Um, where that's made the migration challenging, and the Amita team was really awesome working through this part with us, is it does sometimes mean I'm waiting for our contract to expire. And so I'm trying to migrate pieces, having the contract expire, before I'm really dealing with pay. I don't want to have two systems. I don't want to pay for the same two systems in a month. And so that piece lining it up has been tricky. Some months are easier than others. Some migrations are easier than others, but it's been fairly expense neutral. Where I had to do the hard sell was on how labor and resource intensive it is, and saying I want to take the internal teams and I want to put their eyes on this for the next year to 18 months, because these things take a really long time. And I hope that's okay with everybody. And I do think the revenue upside has made that argument winnable internally. I also have the best boss in the whole world. I don't know if you know that. And so uh, it's easy to present and demonstrate and show things, because she's a very reasonable person.
So we're actually coming up right on the end of the webinar, but I do want to focus on one last aspect, which is you said it, 12 to 18 months. Like walk through that transition. How do you both operate a business while also fundamentally rebuilding the engine for that business? Like how are you going to balance that?
So, it's that human side of transformation again, because the team is amazing. And it's being really clear about everybody's roles and responsibilities during that time. I'm also really famous, so famous for saying this internally. Any marketer would roll their eyes when they hear it, but this is me. I always say, make the sale and we'll figure it out on the back end later. And that is the way we're approaching this. Take in the money and we'll figure out how it's perfect later in the systems. Um, because any business disruption I'd like to minimize. Where I think is hard, and it's something I keep saying to the external teams. I think that money is going to be fine. I think the reporting is going to be weird for a little while. And I do need the entire organization to be understanding and embrace that. I'm just trying to be really upfront about it, get in front of it to say to people, you know what, in April, I'm going to be pulling from two different sources on this line of business. It's going to be a little funky. I really need your compassion. And most of these people, you have to remember, just lived through a CMS migration with us, and so they're used to being on this renovation team. And I think because the CMS migration was really successful, ultimately, I think these teams know we're going to deliver on this one too.
And my last question is, I am sure viewers, there are operators who are watching this webinar right now who are looking at their Frankenstacks and they're questioning their life choices. For other operators who are thinking about their systems and trying to maybe simplify them, what is some advice that you would give them to ensure that they're most efficient, both before they make that switch, but ultimately in making the decision to make that switch?
I would say don't rush it. I am a I'm I move quickly, and I have surrounded myself with really intelligent product and technology people who are very diligent and will say, take a breath. We should tack an extra month on because of all of these dependencies, which you have so conveniently, as an executive, forgot exist. And I think all of that mapping and time and energy from the people who are really diligent and in the weeds and understand all of the dependencies ultimately make a much smoother transition. 2 years ago, maybe three now, we brought on our first technical project manager that the company has ever had. Boom, hugest difference in the CMS migration. Uh, it is always so striking to me when you bring on an expert in a field into the org and you're like, oh, this is how it should be done. Right. Never knew. We were just lying by the seat of our pants until you got here. Um, but having, someone to actually do all of that work. And could this migration have happened a year ago or 2 years ago? Maybe, but I'll be honest, it wouldn't be as successful because we weren't ready for it.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, that is all the time we have for today's webinar. We spend so much time at AMO talking about content, audience monetization, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the right tools to run your business, things won't work seamlessly, and so that'll slow you down, your costs go up, and all that. So I hope everyone learned something today. We are going to make operations an important topic to talk about, and Anne Marie, thank you so much for joining me on this webinar.
Thank you
Good
for
luck
having me.
as you continue your integration. I know there are a lot of work, but the outcome will be you'll actually know what the heck's going on with your audience, which is a good
Yeah.
thing. And finally, special thanks to Omida for making this webinar possible. We've done 4 great webinars this year, talked about a number of different topics. They have been an incredible partner to AMO. And I say this truthfully, not just because they sponsor this webinar, but if you are looking at your media company and you see intense complexity, and you can't really get a good eye on who your audience is or how they're engaging with your stuff, talk to the team. Head over to omeda.com. That's omeda.com. To learn more. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Enjoy, for those in the United States, enjoy your Thanksgiving next Thursday, and take care. Anne Marie, I'll talk to you later.
Yep. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.